Welcome to Got Grass, conversations with the legends and leaders of Bluegrass. You've enjoyed live Bluegrass at Guitar Town CT concerts in Hampton, Connecticut since 2008. From Tony Rice, Rouse Stanley, and Doyle Lawson to Tim O'Brien, Sierra Hall, and Billy Strings. Now you can go behind the scenes as we chat with your favorite Bluegrass stars. I'm your podcast host, Chris Worth. So I'm happy to welcome CJ Lewandowski to Got Grass. Welcome, CJ.
Hey, thanks for having me.
I'm a big hockey fan, so to me, your name sounds like a great hockey player's name for like the Nashville Predators or something. Your last name.
There's also there's actually a famous footballer, which is European soccer. His name is Robert Lewandowski. So every time I go to Europe, when we go through customs, they ask me if I'm related to Robert, and I'm like, yeah, because he's like the best footballer in the world. And I'm like, yep, he's my cousin. They let me through customs easily.
Yeah, he's a pretty well-known guy, but you're obviously not related, right? You're not related to him.
Well, if it is, it's way back. It's
way over, yeah.
Actually a pretty common Polish name.
There is such a thing. So I don't want to pry, but do you mind telling me your real, like your birth name, or do you just go by CJ and you've forgotten your real name?
My full name is Christopher James, but I've always been called CJ. Even my parents called me CJ. I never called Chris or Christopher or anything unless I was in trouble. So that's my name is CJ. That's all I've ever been.
I'm familiar because I have the same first name, Christopher, and you'd only get that when you're in trouble. So
right.
So, CJ, so you're a busy guy. What's the perfect day off like for you if you get one any of these days?
I mean, a perfect day off these days is at home. I live in the Smoky Mountains, and I have a couple acres there, and I live in a log house along a stream and right in a holler. And so a general answer would just be being home, and I've got 2 dogs and a garden, and so it's nowadays that's what I do when I have a day off. I used to kind of fill them with, well, I can run to Nashville, or I can do this, or I can do that, or that kind of thing. But days off are kind of a little far between and quite a bit fewer. So I just try to relax at home, and I've got some old cars as well that I tinker around with. Jimmy Martin's old pickup truck, and I've got one of Bobby Osborne's cars and things like that. I just I think music is my medicine, but also like there comes a point sometimes when you need a little separation, a little bit of differences, a little bit different things happen in your life. I think it's important to balance it. So that's kind of what I do around the house.
Sounds like a nice spot you got there.
It's great, man. I've this week will be 12 years that I've been there.
Wow. Yeah. So a lot of the bluegrass guys I talk to and women say that they didn't really choose bluegrass; it kind of chose them. Would you say for you that was the case, that bluegrass was always going to be your calling?
I think it found me. I was a kid in Missouri.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I was a kid in Missouri, and I was, my mom died when I was about 10. I was an only child, product of divorce, and all that kind of stuff. So, I didn't have too many friends my age, that kind of thing. I had one buddy, I still do to this day. His name's Stephen Lawson. He's still in Missouri. And we were best buddies. He was an only child too, and his mom and my mom were best friends. So we were he's a year younger than me, so we were naturally together all the time. His grandmother babysat me, so we were together all the time. We were brothers. And so one day his mom dropped us off at the movie theater, and we went in and watched this movie that we thought was, a jailbreak movie, which it was, but it ended up being Oh Brother Where Art Thou. And so I was always into music. My grandma Doris on my mom's side, she sang and she taught me how to sing and put me up on, put me in front of a microphone in church for the first time, and you know all that kind of stuff. So I was always interested in music and singing, but I didn't know what bluegrass was until that moment. And that's Old Time and Bluegrass filled that movie. And ironically, Steven's grandparents and family was in the bluegrass scene in Missouri. So there happened to be a Gibson banjo underneath of his grandpa's bed. So he pulled it out, and his grandpa said either learn how to play it or put it up. And so he took that as a challenge. And then I followed suit, starting very, very, very shortly on fiddle and then just switching right to mandolin about 2 or 3 months later. So,
Yeah.
that was 2000 and 2001. And I needed it. I think, like I said earlier, it's my medicine, and I needed something to occupy my time because I was getting into rebellious ways, not understanding like my mom's death, and not understanding a lot of things that happened within my life in a short time. So I needed something that would level me out.
Yeah. That's pretty young to lose your mom. I'm sorry
Yeah,
to hear that. That was a tough one. Wow.
it is what it is. I think now, looking back, everything happens for a reason, and I wouldn't be doing the things that I do now, and I wouldn't be playing bluegrass music for a living. I would have probably never found bluegrass. It's crazy how you're led, like your footsteps are led, and there's a reason why I am where I am today, and I don't think it would have happened if my mom was still here. Not to say that you know, that I wouldn't want her here, but you never know where I would have went from there. So
Right.
everything happens for a reason.
I'm gonna mention a few names and get your reaction. I'm gonna save Bobby Osborne for a little later because I know you could probably talk about Bobby Osborne for the rest of the night, and that would be a good conversation. And we will. But I want to talk about a few people that I think were part of their lives, and maybe yours in an influential way, like someone like Carter Stanley. Was he someone that you were influenced by? I know he probably died before you were born, but
Oh yeah, yeah. Carter
yeah,
died in '66, and so Carter and Ralph, the Stanley brothers, were very influential in the beginning. I think that's some of the first stuff that I was really attracted to, just because of the raw edge of the Stanley brothers and that mountain sound. And Carter's songwriting was, you look back at it now and it's standards, standard subject matter and things like that, but standard writing ways too. But he was the guy who did that. And I think, like, as a songwriter in bluegrass music, I think he's probably the most original, uh, as far back as you can go, and as
um,
far as material and the time period. There's a lot of people grabbing material from other genres of music and applying it, and obviously, Bill and Lester Flatt and people on those lines, they were all writing songs, but Carter was one of the first that was Carter and Ralph, but they were all Carter songs, and they were they were recording only primarily, their original material, which that was a first for sure. And I wish I could have met him, but he was, he was gone way before I came
yeah,
around. But I sometimes think, sit around and think, what if Carter had lived to be 85? What if Hank Williams would have lived to be, over 30? What if, Keith Keith Whitley would have, lived to be older, or people like that. Charlie Moore, for example, too.
yeah.
Lost a lot of good ones early.
It's amazing, and I don't know if it's just music, but so many musicians, not just bluegrass and country, but rock, died before they were 30.
Yeah, well,
It's just
there's a lot of struggle and sacrifice, I guess, that comes along with this lifestyle. And I use that term lifestyle as it's not a lifestyle as far as, like, you are playing music and you're around certain, influences and whatnot. But it's not that. It's just the stress of things sometimes, and it's hard enough. I'm sitting in the back of the bus right now, which is an amazing thing because I can go take a nap after this while we're going to the next show. But reflecting back with Carter, like those guys were in. There was no interstates. There was no, all you could use was a map. You'd have to stop at places and use payphones, and you'd really have to do a lot of communication before ever setting foot on these roads to go somewhere. So I couldn't imagine now or then, because now is pretty difficult. But it kind of goes to like it chooses you a little bit. But you know the wintertime, I can't wait for slow season sometimes just so I can relax and chill out. But then, I'm home for 2 weeks. I'm like, what am I doing? I need to go. So there's always this urge to move and to see new things and to, propel and feed whatever it is inside of you that tells you to go.
Yeah.
But also, there's a lot of sacrifices because, you got people at home that you miss. You're gone and playing on the weekends, so your friend group is quite a bit different. Most everybody that has a 9 to 5 is at home during the weekends and working during the week. We're home more during the week and gone on the weekends, so it's hard to find friends. So I think a lot of these guys have gotten lonely, and there's bad results that can happen sometimes, and drinking is a primary culprit of all that stuff. And I think we've all had our battles and our vices. I know I do still. So you just gotta work it out. Moderation and toleration, I guess.
Wow. Yeah, I know it's a lot of time traveling and just being away from home and like you say, being lonely. I mean, you have your bandmates and stuff, but I imagine after a while you just want to get away and be with whoever's at home waiting for you when you can't because you're out, 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 out.
Yeah, there's a difference between being with. You can be lonely and be in a crowd of 100 people. I think it's an inner thing more than an outer. And I'm very content. Like I'm an only child, like I said, and it's easy for me to be by myself a lot of times. And I live by myself now, and I I I enjoy it for the most part. And if I need company, I've got good friends, and I can call them and say, hey, come over for dinner.
Yeah, right. Well, yeah, if you're an only child, my oldest daughter was an only child for 20 years, so yeah, you kind of grow up making your own fun, and you
Yeah,
have friends, but you're used to doing things on your own and keeping yourself occupied, which a lot of people aren't. If you have 8 siblings,
yeah.
there's never a dull moment. But
You can be creative.
yeah, yeah.
So,
I've been watching a bunch of stuff about the Osbournes, and I learned a lot. But another figure that was prominent, maybe not in such a great way, was Jimmy Martin back in the day. Did you ever
and
get to meet Jimmy Martin yourself, or was he?
yes, I did.
Yeah.
I met Jimmy one time, and ironically, we are. This is crazy. We are parked directly across the street right now from the cemetery where Jimmy's at. Like we are. If I can point to his stone right now. I can see it. So,
That's weird.
yeah. But Jimmy, that was really the first one that got my blood pumping right there. Carter and Ralph was a dang good, the harmonies and the culture of it all, and it was a fine introduction to just what they did. But the next step of like that good and country sound and that bounce that Jimmy created, the energy that he brought, that was completely different. And it even goes back to 1949 when he joined Monroe. Like he put he put the drive and he put the higher keys and everything into bluegrass music. Whichever anybody who listens to that stuff can identify that, but just what Jimmy contributed just by being himself was amazing. Again, another person who had his vices, but I'm friends with two of his sons. I have his pickup truck. I have, I've got his, I've got a lot of collectibles that were like his stuff. I've got a pair of Jimmy's boots that somebody, his son Ray gave to, or son Buddy gave to me actually.
Do they fit you?
But yeah, they do. I wear them every once in a while. I wear them.
Yeah.
But it's amazing to listen, to that stuff and hear what Jimmy contributed to the genre to make it what it is. Because really, those guys they didn't know there was no guideline, there was no nothing. It was just they had went through the school of Monroe, and Monroe said that's the way it's supposed to be. But then they took it and said, you know what, I want to do this and I want to do that, and they did. And Jimmy was probably one of the first. I don't know this for a fact, but I think Jimmy was probably one of the first, artists that came out of the Monroe School to chart on, Billboard country music stuff. It wasn't thrown in the category of old timey or anything like that. He was up there with Fair and Young and Ray Price and things like that. So
right.
Jimmy's attitude as far as his music was just impeccable, and like he was a hurricane. You couldn't stop him, and I took a lot of influence on that. And at one time, I remember the first time I ever went to IBMA. We had a Jimmy Martin jam, and I'm like probably 20 at that time, and this is among kids my age that were playing a completely different style of music than me and my buddies were. But I remember people trying to stump me with Jimmy Martin songs, and I knew every one of them. And that was a proud moment for me.
I can imagine. Wow. Yeah.
I used to know them all.
Yeah, right. Were you influenced at all by the Bluegrass album band period?
Yeah, for sure. I didn't. I listened to that stuff. I was having a conversation about this actually this morning. I listened to that stuff. It was so easy. I didn't have internet at home. Growing up, had CDs and cassette tapes mainly. Had some vinyl, but not much. So you were pressing pause and pressing play as much as you could. And in these box sets and stuff, like for example, Jimmy Martin's Bear Family box set, the songs weren't in 440 tuning. So you go from one track to the next, and you've got to retune your guitar to the track, or to play along, and you've got to retune your mandolin to that track. And the album band and other folks that did like tribute albums and things like that helped a lot for me at the time, because I didn't, the hassle of trying to figure out where in the world they are tuned to. That was nice, but the respect that I have for the album band, I never really gained the respect that I have now until probably, I don't know, 2013 or so. I was at Bean Blossom, Bill Monroe's Bluegrass Festival, and Doyle Lawson was doing a workshop, and somebody asked him like, why did you cover those songs? Did you think that they needed improved upon? And he said, you couldn't improve upon them. He said, what us guys that were in the Bluegrass album band saw was a generation of people who thought we started bluegrass music. So we wanted to take them back and introduce them to things, and maybe that would open up the door to where they would go start learning kind of in reverse. He said, his quote was, that's like starting third grade without going through kindergarten the second. You're lost. You don't know where you're at. So he said, we did that because we saw a need for it. And we had a respect for those guys, and we wanted them to know,
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Actually, Doyle was on the podcast, and we talked about all that stuff. And he said, it was kind of like Tony Rice's idea, but Doyle said I was the guy who went out and got all the songs. He said I used to go find all the songs for the band because they knew I would find good stuff, and so he said that was my role. Really, one of my major roles was finding the material, and then Tony
Yeah,
would say yes, no, or maybe. But yeah, he said it was pretty amazing times with those guys.
as as accoladed as Tony is, um, I I guess it's in the biography that he didn't even want to take breaks on these songs because he respected the arrangements so much that he did not want to do that. And it, over time that there was more and more guitar breaks on that, which is
Yeah,
fantastic. But just that tipping of the hat to the original guys is like, no, I'm here to play the rhythm.
yeah, yeah. I've seen that in some of the videos too, where he looks like he's not going to take one, or he does it reluctantly. Like it's just not, guitar solo is not part of this music. It
Yeah,
wasn't, but of course
yeah.
he made it a big part. So there's another name that I know you're familiar with, the Po Ramblin Boys. That's the band you
Oh yeah.
started, right? Was that your
Yes.
inspiration to start that band, or was it a bunch of guys, or how did that
Well,
happen?
that was a fluke in a way because I had moved, like I said, moved to my house there in the Smoky Mountains, and I'd moved down there from Kentucky because I saw an opportunity to play music. There was Old Smoky Moonshine and the city of Gatlinburg, and it was very heavily influenced. Dollywood is down there, so the themes down there, the culture is very music related, acoustic music related. So there was a lot of opportunity to be hired, a lot more than anywhere else that I lived. So I moved down there, and I started filling in at the Old Smoky Moonshine Distillery with bands. They have bands every day. And so I started filling in, and then they opened up a second location. At that point, the entertainment director said, "Hey, you're a pretty trustworthy guy. I like your work ethic. I like what you do. Would you want to quote unquote manage a band, put together a band and be the leader of it?" And I said, "Yeah, that's fine with me." He said, "Well, we're opening up more another distillery, so I think we've got another. I think he said another 10 shifts or something like that a week. So we're trying to fill it. We're going to add another band." So that I said, "Yeah, that's fine with me." But I said, "I have an idea though. I want to call my friends that I had met. This would have been 2014 when that happened, but I'd met Jeremy Brown and Josh Wrinkle in 2008, and then I'd met Jasper Lorenzen in 2010. And actually, ironically, Jasper was working in the bottle shop over there of that distillery. He was serving shots to all the people that came through to sample,
Hmm.
and so I called Josh and Jeremy. They were in Kentucky. We lived 20 minutes apart from each other when I was in Kentucky. Every night that we could, we were usually somewhere playing music, somewhere listening to music, doing karaoke, whatever it was. We were together a lot, and them two wanted to play music for a living. And this was the opportunity that I saw that I could play music with my friends. Uh, Never really thought it was just going to be the distillery band, and that's all it was going to be, and it's fine. But we went down. They moved down. A few weeks later after they had got their feet wet with it and decided that they wanted to do it. And I remember day one, uh, the entertainment director come up and he said, "Well, we put all the band names on the board so people can follow who's going to be here." And he's like, "Who? What do you want to be called?" I'm like, I don't, I don't know." And um, he, I said, "Well, I was doing a duo with a guy named Bo Isaacs, and Bo was playing guitar and singing tenor, and I was singing lead and doing. We're just doing just us two playing the mandolin and guitar." And he had partially written a song, and he was pitching it to people at that time. And he's like, it's called the Po Ramblin Boy. And he said, "Man, that'd be a really good name, the Po Ramblin Boys, wouldn't it?" And so we started initially the duo we would every once in a while say, "Oh, we're the Po Ramblin Boys," but we normally wouldn't say what we even were. We just get up there and play a little bit of music and then get off stage. But so at that moment, when the entertainment director asked me what we should call the band, I said, "Well, let's just call it the Po Ramblin Boys, like Bo, like me and Bo were." And so that was it. And then we had no initiative to travel and play. Jeremy and Josh were with Tommy Brown and the county line grass. I was with Carl Shiflett at the time. We didn't need to travel, didn't want to travel. It was nice to go play 5 or 10 hours a day and then drive 20 miles and sleep in your own bed each night. And that's the way it was. And then about a year and a half into it, we started taking on dates because just people were offering good money and we could make it work. And so our first ever touring outside of Old Smoky didn't come until August of 2015. And we went to Canada for about a week and then came home for a couple days and then went to Europe for 2 weeks. So that was our first tour, was not even in the United States.
Wow. Wow. So was it the Po Ramblin Boys or Poor? Was it one or the other, or did you pick?
It was like I was just saying, Po Ramblin Boys, and then when we decided to start a Facebook page, because everyone was like, we want to follow you, we want to know, we want to see when you're in Gatlinburg or Pigeon Forge or whatever. I just, I don't know why I did that. Po Ramblin Boys. I remember I was playing a tune that I was doing a lot at that time that Monroe had learned from his Uncle Penn, and it's called Po White Folks, and it was P-O apostrophe. And so I was like, little homage to, Uncle Penn and Bill Monroe.
Yeah.
Let's shorten it. And then we were definitely, this was an entertainment act, for the distillery. You were playing to people who had no idea what bluegrass music was. So the main thing was you had to play it fast. They loved singing, they loved fast, and they wanted you to tell jokes and stuff. So I would always say that, be sure to put some money in the tip bucket because, maybe one day when we get enough money, we can change our name. But right now we're too poor to afford the O and the R.
That's a perfect setup right there. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. So let's talk about Bobby Osborne, because I know you have a big project out with him and of his music. People listening know he was, half of the Osborne Brothers, who were really like the rock stars of bluegrass for about 30 years. I mean, they were hugely popular. I mean, they were like rock stars, right? They
Very
really
much
were.
so. Yeah,
And
very much.
they had that vocal style with the high lead that I don't think anybody else has ever equaled, that beautiful singing style.
Yeah,
In fact, I was amazed. I've seen and heard recordings of him probably on your album when he was 90 or so and still had that beautiful, clear voice that didn't waver. Unbelievable
yeah,
to me. Because most
yeah,
artists, I mean, get into your 60s and you start to lose that. You lose the highs, then you get into your 70s and you just can't even sing anymore. That's
yeah.
remarkable. Remarkable.
Bobby was an anomaly. He he did things that no one else could do. And the thing about Bobby was he wasn't trying to do anything else that, he wasn't trying to be different. He was just adapting to what he was dealt. And he knew he wanted to play music for a living at a young age, but he started learning on guitar, electric guitar, and originally acoustic, and then when he was, when power came around, when he went to Ohio, he got an electric guitar and wanted to play like Billy Bird and sing like Ernest Tubb. And the story that he told was, any young person is going to go through puberty at some point, and he could sing. He could sing all these Ernest Tubb songs. Well, when he went through puberty, instead of his voice getting deeper, his voice went higher. Why?
Oh,
Who
yeah.
knows? But thank God it did.
That's crazy. Yeah. Wow.
But that's what happened. And so then, he went and saw, he was about 15, I guess, right there at that time when he went and saw the original bluegrass band of Lester, Earl, Bill, Cedric Rainwater, and Chubby Wise, and that's when he decided at that moment. He told me, he said, I was watching that, and he said, I couldn't believe that Earl Scruggs was making that much music. He was one person making that much music out of a banjo, because before his dad played clawhammer and old time banjo, but he didn't believe it when he heard it on the radio. So his dad took him to Memorial Hall in Dayton, and he got to see that happen live. And from that point on, he said, I want to do this. And, shortly after, he joined the Lonesome Pine Fiddlers, and, the rest is history. But, the stories that were told to me, and, I'm sure there's been same stories told over and over again to many people, but, I cherish the times that I had with Bobby. The first time I met him, I was a scared kid. I think I was 19 when no, I would have been 2000. So I would have been, I'd have been about 17. Yeah, I think so, when I met him the first time. And, I just got my picture with him, and I was scared to death, because this is a Grand Ole Opry star, like the Grand Ole Opry was a big thing to me, still is, to this day. Like that, to me, that's the pinnacle of country music. And, if you're there, then you've accomplished something. And that was Bobby's dream too, because that's what the radio, they were the king of the airwaves, WSM was. And so he wanted to be like these people. And, fast forwarding to the end, Bobby, with me, he talked, and I'm sure he did with everyone, but he talked of such high esteem for Bill and Lester and Earl and Roy Acuff and Ernest Tubb and all these Grand Ole Opry stars. He never put himself in the same category. Like, he was a Grand Ole Opry artist and he was a Grand Ole Opry member, but he talked about, Ernest Tubb and Acuff and those guys as his idols. And to see someone who I thought would be an equal to those great names, to see him enamored, and to see him listen to an Ira and Charlie Louvin song and say, you want to hear the best, cuss word, sing tenor singing that's ever been. Yeah. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure I'm sitting across the table from the guy, the best tenor singer that's ever been. He said, and he would turn on Ira and Charlie. He was a fan all the way to the end. And that, that I gained a lot of insight that way. It's just like, I've taken advantage of some of those situations that I've been in, and I need to sit back and I need to reevaluate. Like, I was a little burnt out at the time that me and Bobby started a project together, and it's good now. Like, how can a guy that has been playing music professionally for 75 years still like it? And he inspired me. He inspired me just by his. I've never met anyone that loved bluegrass and country music any more than Bobby Osborne. There's nobody.
It's funny because I've been watching some nice documentaries of things about the Osbornes, and Sonny Osborne kind of got tired of it, right? And he just said, I'm done with this. He didn't have the excitement, and it seems like Bobby Osborne had the excitement up until the day he died. He still wanted to play.
Yeah, there was I was talking to somebody about some, a thing that a little bit of a project we're planning, a talk, and I said, well, they wanted to talk about Bobby, and I said, well, it's either everything, like the all-encompassing career of Bobby, or there's three phases to it. There's before Sonny, there's with Sonny, and there's after Sonny, and they're all pretty dang incredible. Like, who had I don't know when it was cut, but Pain in My Heart, Bobby wrote that, and then all of a sudden he goes in the record shop and Flatt Scruggs has heard it somewhere on the radio, the Lonesome Pine Fiddlers version. They like it so much they picked it up. So his heroes that he saw in 1947 just put a song that he wrote on a record. Like, what? I tried to get that out of him one day, and he's just like, "Oh yeah, yeah." I couldn't really believe it. But he's probably told the story so many times he's a little tired of it. But like, wow, what an honor, But he really he never. I think he went through rejuvenation periods, and I'm sure he was tired. And he did tell me, when him and Sonny for 50 years, he said at that time, he said I was wore out with it too. He said, but after he said my boys are playing music, we're playing music, and that was kind of the inspiration too. Was well, Sonny quits. I want to keep going because I don't know any other way. And for two, I got these boys, my sons. They can come in. I want to play music with my sons. So that was a big pivot point for him. And his I remember sitting at the Opry with him one day. They were interviewing Bobby for it was a news broadcast out of Knoxville, which University of Tennessee is over there, and obviously Rocky Top is the fight song. And so that would have been 2022, right? 1967, yeah, 2022. So they were filming for a little mini docu-series that they were going to call it, 55 years of Rocky Top, 55th anniversary of the release of the song. And they asked Bobby that night, he was 90 at that point, and he said, Bobby, what do you hope? What do you? He said, well, I hope people will remember my name, and maybe I've contributed something to the music that I love so much. And they said, well, are you ever going to retire? Are you thinking about retiring? And he said, I'll quit the day that the Lord tells me that I'm going to quit. And that was him saying that he was, he'll quit the day he dies. And with efforts from a lot of people and a lot of things that were happening with me and him at that point, it happened. He was still playing the Opry. He had to cancel an Opry date 2 weeks before he passed, and it was because he needed to go to the hospital. And so I think that was, Bobby loved the Grand Ole Opry so much, and he loved people so much. He didn't want to fail his people. And I think that was probably the first time that he ever had to cancel. Like, when they call and say, well, can you make it these days? He could say yes or no. But I'm pretty sure that's the first time ever in his life since 64 that he couldn't make an Opry appearance that he promised. And I think that was the beginning of him letting go,
Yeah.
it's he wanted to play music till the day that he died, and myself, along with a help from a lot of other friends, we made that happen for him. Just as 2 weeks shy of it, so
Yeah.
he did what he could all the way until he couldn't, and that's exactly what he wanted to do. So I'm kind of proud of that, just because people invested in him all the way to the end, and that's my hopes for any artist and any person, really, any human, is to I don't want someone to sit around and think about like, I'd be better off gone just because I'm older. Nah,
Mhm.
like everybody has contributions and influence and amazing things all the way to the end.
Yeah. Yeah. The project you did called Keep On Keepin On, uh, was that kind of your idea, or was that something you did with his approval? Or how did that all take place?
Yeah.
It's a pretty amazing project. It's got a lot of great people on there that obviously love him and loved him and wanted to contribute.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, initially there was a conversation between me and Bobby Osborne Jr. and Raleigh one night actually, and for the IBMA awards. We had done something. I don't know. I was going over to the house and hanging out with Bobby and all that stuff, and I had noticed that he had started repeating himself sometimes, And so he would loop, I guess you could call it. He might tell the same story 3 times. And now, granted, 20 years ago when I met him, he was in his 70s, and he would repeat stories as well. But it was for emphasis, emphasis of getting the story right. So
Gotcha.
when it initially started happening, I was like, well, he's doing it. Well, it started happening a little bit more. This was, right after COVID. Bobby didn't leave the house. He was there. He didn't have, there wasn't a whole lot of communication with other people. The operator wasn't calling, things like that. So uh, I noticed that, and I asked Bobby Jr. out of concern for my friend, and he said, he doesn't have dementia. He doesn't have Alzheimer's or anything like that. We actually went to the doctor for it not too long ago, and it's pretty much he's not exercising his cognitive abilities because he's not singing. He played the mandolin every day as long as he could, but uh, just he wasn't talking to people, and so he wasn't being creative. And I went to a friend's house out in California. I stayed out there a week, and I was just, venting. Like, I'm worried about him. You know, I'm afraid that because he was in such good shape. I'm afraid that Bobby's mind is going to go before his body does, and I don't want that. I don't want him just to be a shell and start embarrassing himself and things like that. Just concern for older folks, and it just happened to be a Grand Ole Opry legend. But I I was mentioning these things, and I said, I wouldn't mind, me and Bobby are so close. I wouldn't mind maybe cutting a song with him or something. And that guy Keith Barncastle, he actually has Turnberry Records, and he said, "Well, have you ever asked him about doing anything like that?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Well, what if you did?" I said, "Oh, Bobby wouldn't want to cut nothing with me." He said, "What? I don't know." He said, "I'm going to give you a budget." He said, do you think you could do a whole record?" I said, "What?" He said, I want you guys to do this." He said, "I'll pay for it through the record company, Turnberry Records. Now your job is to ask Bobby." So I got back home and I called him, and Bobby was. I said, "Hey, there's a guy at California record company. They want to cut a record with us. Me and you, like, showcase our friendship and showcase our old mandolins. The mandolins kind of brought us together, of course." And he said, "Well, I'm not doing anything else. Yeah, let's do it." And I thought, what in the world? This guy I met 20 years ago that is a hero of mine, he just said that he got a record with me. So we started in January of 2023, and it was, we had the whole album planned out. I let Bobby pick the songs. We worked on the songs, we arranged, we got the keys, and that whole time I watched what I was worried about, his cognitive ability come back. Like he wasn't repeating himself. He just needed to be creative, and he needed people. So I gathered, I found the studio that it was a quite an undertaking because of his age and his ability, his mobility as well. His steps were not his friend, as any older person, and so I wanted to surround him with people that would enjoy being around him and understand if, it took a little bit longer or whatever. This was going to be a special sessions, not knock it out and get it out type thing. Like, no, we're gonna take time. There were days in the studio that Bobby would want to sit and just tell stories, and we did. Like, all those people that were in the studio, they gathered around and they listened at his feet, and that's what he wanted. And that was all a part of this therapy too, and
I would have made a good recording too. The stories of Bobby
oh
Osborne.
man, I don't know if we've got some of them, but I'd have to ask Ben. But I picked the studio because it was in Nashville. He'd worked with Ben Surratt before. Ben was so accommodating to Bobby's every need and want and understanding of what was going on. All the musicians were, idolized Bobby, the original, the backup band for all his stuff. So we all wanted to be there to help a man that probably helped us out in a lot of different ways that he didn't even know of. And then, we had special moments. He had Kenny Baker's fiddle, one of Kenny's fiddles that Kenny gave to him. So we brought the old fiddle out, and it was played on the record. Sonny's, famous Granada banjo was brought out and played on this album. A lot of cool moments. And we worked at it. And then, we had a session. I think we did 3 sessions, maybe 4. I had to look at our track notes. I know we did 3 sessions with Bobby, and the last song he sang, that we got his voice on was Rocky Top. He wanted to cut Rocky Top again, and like I said, I let him choose the material, and he was putting together a really good album. But the last song he sang was Rocky Top, and that was right. That was the last. I'm pretty sure that was probably the last song he sang around anybody into a microphone. And it's kind of, it's pretty appropriate. But 2 weeks later, he was gone, and we had another session cut right before he passed. And I kept trying to get a hold of him, and I couldn't get a hold of him. And so, anyhow, finally, one day his son, he's like, I texted Bobby Jr., and he's like, well, you haven't heard. It's not really public knowledge, but, Dad went to the hospital the other day. And I said, oh. And he's like, no visitors, no nothing like that. And I said, well, I'm on my way to Nashville. He said he's, grouchy and things like that. And he said, I'm on my way to Nashville. I said, could I possibly go see him? And he said, let me ask Mom. So did. And they let me in, and I talked to him, and he was sleeping when I got there, and he woke up and saw me, and he was tickled. And we were going to have our first single was coming out. He died on June 27th. Our first single was supposed to come out June 30th. And so I was sitting there in the hospital telling him about, and he was anxious. He was talking about the cover art and all that stuff. And you could see that he was trying to get, he wanted to keep going with it. And I walked out, I said, Chief, I said, you take care of yourself and, listen to what the doctors are saying. And we got music to make. And I said, you take care of yourself and I love you. And he said, he looked at me and he said, keep on keeping on. And we had already cut that song, but he pointed at me and said, keep on keeping on. And so that was the last thing he ever said to me. And I didn't see him anymore.
Yeah.
But, there's a lot of, at that moment, when he died, I was done. I was over it. I didn't want to hear his voice. I was tore up because I felt like I failed him in ways because at that point, we only had 8 tracks with his voice on it. I felt like I had failed him. Like he wanted this to happen. We actually had another album planned as well. He had a whole list of songs that we were going to do. And so I was beating myself up. I missed him. Like, he had become, I talked to that man every day for probably 3 years. And he passed on a Tuesday, I guess it was. And his daughter messaged me shortly after that. And, she knew that I knew and messaged me shortly after. And she said, Dad told me on Sunday that you were his best friend. And it's like, I just said earlier that the Grand Ole Opry is the pinnacle, but it's like, I did a good deed. I'm not patting myself on the back, but what I wanted to accomplish for what I considered to be one of my best friends, like he thought the same way about me. And that's, I still get tore up about it, but, I miss him a lot on Sundays, but, about, after we buried him and stuff, about a week later, 2 weeks later, maybe I was at my house and I'm sitting on the front porch. And I'm like, what am I going to do? Like we've just cut all these tracks. Like I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear his voice. I'm going to miss him. I'm going to shelf it. Like I'm not going on with this. And literally having this conversation with myself alone, no one out there but me. And he could have bent down and said it right in my ear. I heard it just that plain. And he said, I gave you something. Now do what you want with it. And I thought, what does that mean? And immediately, like I said, I've got, instead of doing this with Bobby, I got to do it for him. This is his last will and testament. Like, I have to do this. I have to do this for him, his memory. I have to do this for the people that have listened to Bobby since the day they were born. Like I have to put these recordings out for him. And so what I was going to do is I was going to put out the 8 tracks, and that was it. It was going to be, like an EP, I guess, of sorts. And then, we go to Raleigh for the IBMA Awards, and they asked me to be a part of a tribute to Bobby on the awards. And they did Ruby. I played the mandolin and sang the end part and all that stuff. And totally, it was amazing to be a part of. And I walked backstage, and Dell and Ronnie and Robbie, all the McCurrys were back there, and Bobby Jr. was back there, and they were singing "She's No Angel." And Dell was singing lead, and then Bobby Jr. was singing his dad's part, the Red Allen and Osborne Brothers thing. So I jumped in on the low part with Sonny would have sung, and I we played the whole song. And I was like, man, that's awesome right there. Like that's so cool. Like, they're jamming, Dale McCurry is jamming Osborne Brothers songs backstage at the IBMA Awards. And so I was sitting there talking, they were kind of giving condolences as we all were. And we were walking out, and Bobby Jr. says, that'd be kind of cool to get Dell on there to sing "She's No Angel." And I looked at him, I said, "Where are you going?" He said, "I'm going to dinner with the Price sisters." And I said, "You go on ahead, I'll catch up." And he said, what are you doing? I said, "Well, if we're going to ask Dell if he wants to do that, there ain't no better time than now." And so I turned around, his manager was there too, and I kind of cornered them all and said, "Hey, what do you think about doing this?" And so from that point on, that was the inspiration to start bringing artists in to help. Me and Bobby had talked some ideas, maybe this person or that person, but it's like, we have to make this a full album, and these people want to pay homage to Bobby as well. Let's make this a huge collaborative thing, encompassing and focusing on, Bobby's influence, but also these are the last recordings that he has ever sang. So there was many phases to it, but it was, originally me and Bobby just going to be buddies and play some mandolin tunes and sing a couple songs together. Then it turned to the trash can, and then somebody dug it out of the trash can for me, whoever that may be, and and we brought it to light. So this, it's been 2 years since his passing. And the label at one point was like, "We need to get this buttoned up, like it's going to lose relevance and this, that, and the other." And I said, I think we have to let this thing naturally go and let these people that want to play and sing on this, we need to think about their time. And if they want to do it, we need to let them do it. We need to give them the opportunity to do it. So, then comes in, Dell and Ronnie and Rob come in the studio. Vince Gill comes into the studio. Sam Bush comes in the studio. Molly Tuttle, Billy Strings, Paul Brewster, who was singing with the Osborne Brothers for many years. AJ Lee, like the Po Ramblin Boys, Jaylee Roberts, like all these people, they wanted to do something. So it's like, why not? Let's do it. And it became something, it was a showcase of friendship, but now it's just a showcase of love for what Bobby gave us, and I'm proud. I'm proud that it's done. I'm glad that it's done. And now I've got to figure out what else to do with that time that I spent on it. But I'll figure it out. But I'm anxious to see what the world thinks of Bobby's last recordings. Like, you can't beat Bobby in 1979 singing "Rank Strangers" on the Bluegrass collection. But he sang it again and on this record because he wanted to. We weren't trying to beat anything. He just wanted to sing it. And so we did. And to hear 91-year-old Bobby sing "Rank Strangers," there you could argue that it's better or not better or whatever than that 79 recording, but to hear the age in his voice and to hear, and to know that he's gone now. Rank Strangers from 91-year-old Bobby in B flat hits pretty damn hard. That was one of the hardest ones to listen back to and work on, but we did it.
Well, you should be proud of it. It's as you say, things just sometimes fall together for whatever reason. It sounds like it all fell together, but
I'm so
without you,
thankful.
it wouldn't have fallen together. So,
Just an
kudos
idea,
to you.
a concern, a concerned friend. And
Yeah.
I wanted him to live a quality life. A man of that stature, a man of that accomplishment, like the first bluegrass band to play the White House, the first
Hmm.
bluegrass band to play at college, one of the first, the most popular bluegrass song of all times is under his belt, 2 state songs, all these things. And at the end of the day, he was a guy, and he wanted to work on his property, and he wanted to work on cars and do all these things too. He loved music more than anybody, but to see him doubt himself after everything that he's done, that was where I was like, we got to help him. He was there was a he probably wouldn't have called it this, but it was a depression, and
Hmm.
he, back when he was a kid, depression wasn't a word besides the Great Depression, and he he coped, he dealt, but also like I could see that he felt like he wasn't worthy or wasn't, necessary anymore, and nah, like everything that he has done um, outweighed, he did things that some people, it would take 3 or 4 lifetimes to do. And so he lived every day of 91 years. And I'm glad to have been a part of it. And I'm glad he's part of my life. Like, it's something I'll never forget. And the great thing is I have these recordings too. Like, even if the record flops, I have the time in the studio with him. I have the time in his house with him. I have times that most people don't have, and I also have those recordings. So anytime I miss my buddy Bobby, I just turn on some of that. I obviously I can turn on any Osborne Brothers or Bobby Osborne music, but those songs mean a lot to me. So it's a great token to have. And
Yeah.
all he did was say yes, and from there, this is what we got.
Yeah. Right. I remember Ralph Stanley played at our series a couple of years before he died, and his grandson Nathan was in the band. And at one point, Ralph got out there and sat down on a stool and sang by himself one of his famous songs. I don't remember which one it was, but it was one of those songs that, he was, I don't know, in his late 80s, I guess. And then he sang a verse, and he said, "What's the next verse?" He couldn't remember
Yeah,
it, but it was just that the power of all that life and living came out in his singing. I'm sure it was
yeah,
the same with Bobby. It's like,
was
you don't sing like you did when you were 30, but you sing better in a way because you have all that heart in there, or whatever it
yeah,
is.
the heart of it and the time, you know, the things he saw and heard, and all
Yeah.
the time that he has spent. It spilled out. Like I remember, I went over. I would go to the Opry with him a lot and be backstage because even his son kind of said it at one point. He said, he peps up a little bit more when you're around. And so I
Mhm.
said, well, anytime, anytime that I'm not traveling and you guys are playing the Opry, I will drive the 3.5 hours over and the 3.5 hours back for that because I don't want to miss it. And I want him to do the best and be represented in the best way possible. And if like just me being there, cutting up with him and all that stuff helps, I'll totally do it. And I went to the Ryman with him one time, and I showed up. He didn't know I was showing up. I showed up, and he had forgotten his famous white hat,
Mhm.
and he was devastated. And that's all he could think about. And then he also he was having a knee issue, and so he was afraid to stand on the stage. He didn't want to fall. He didn't want to fall
Mhm.
in front of anyone either. So there was a few times that he sat in a chair on the Opry stage, whether it be the Grand Ole Opry House or the Ryman. And he was so disappointed in that. And then he was so in his head that day about, falling and the hat. I can't believe I left my hat all the way at the house, and we got to play in 10 minutes. And he's like, my voice, I tried to sing this song tonight, and I sang it at the house, and I just, my voice has never failed me. And he was just so caught up in everything that was going through his head. And I remember walking down, we took the elevator down, and he was standing at the edge of the stage, and Bill Anderson come up and kind of said something to him, and he was sitting on a stool, and he turned around and looked at me and he said, I don't want to fall walking out there to that chair. And I said, okay. I said, what do you need? He said, will you help me out there? And I said, are you sure? Is that what you want? Because he was very stoic, and I wanted to make sure that it was okay with him. And he said, yeah, I wouldn't have anybody else do it for me. But he said, can you do that? And I said, yeah. So I just, got on the side with his mandolin, and just, I was an arm for him and took him out to the chair. And when he was done with his 2 songs, went back out there and helped him back out. And, everything went away though, like him being worried, like the confidence that he had walking out there on that stage. Like I felt it, even though he had someone on his arm, like the people that screamed and yelled for him, and, everybody singing Rocky Top with him. And he did Cabin in Caroline that night as the first song, and he apologized all over the place before he started singing it. My voice is, I'm sorry, I'm sitting in a chair. My voice is not doing real good tonight, but we'll see how this goes. And he killed it. He just, then people loved it. And so, the power of music, I saw it happen. And, the last actual show that he played was at right here in Nashville. Actually, it was at the American Legion Hall, post 82. And we did a small residency there. He just wanted to play. That's what he didn't care about how much it was going to make him. He just wanted to play music. So we took him over there, and that Ryman show was in February, and that's what he was so worried about, his legs and his knee and everything. And so I got him one of those little cycling things that you could sit in your recliner and pedal. And I had it shipped to his house, and he started using it. And he told me, he's like, I've been using this thing. I do a mile a day. He said, I call it my CJ machine. And he said, it's working. It's helping. And that night in March, it was like the 3rd week of March. It was the last actual set. He played the Opry a few more times, but it was the last set of music that he ever did. He stood the whole 45 minutes. And, to see the confidence come back just by, I'll spend $100 on that little machine and have it shipped to your house if you use it and you think it'll help. And it did. Like his mental capacity, his physical capacity, it all become better over that last like 6 months there. I wanted to relieve him of his depression,
Yeah.
and it worked, and the music did it too. It wasn't me necessarily. It was the music that we were making, the creativity, the trust that he had in me, and the faith that I had in him. And it was a beautiful thing, a beautiful friendship. And if I don't go anywhere else in the world, like, I have ambition to be a Grand Ole Opry member, a Grand Ole Opry star, like Bobby. I've had that ever since, before I met him. But if that never happens, or if I never get another Grammy nomination or a Grammy award, like Bobby Osborne called me his best friend. I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah. Well, I will say from hearing you talk very honestly about this, that you had a good friend in him, but he had a good friend in you. So that's pretty
we needed
that's
each
pretty
other.
cool. Pretty
Yeah,
cool, I have to say.
we needed each other at a time where I was burnt out and done. A little short. I don't know how long your podcasts go. I could talk for days, but a little short tidbit. I went to, every year around Thanksgiving, week after Thanksgiving, I go and visit friends in Florida, and I shut my phone off. I don't, like, it's a detox week. And I said, I sitting there in the pool, all by myself again, floating around. I said, you know what? I'm quitting this stuff. Bobby had died. So I'm quitting this stuff. I'm done. I can't handle it no more. I ain't doing it. I'm gonna go to realty school and I'm gonna be a realtor. That's what I'm gonna do. As soon as I get back to Tennessee, I am going to sign up and I'm gonna tell the band that I'm hanging it up and they can go on without me. Even though I started it, like they can go on without me because I don't have it in me anymore. And I got home and I had a package from I got home and it was like 2 a.m. and I got a package and it was from the Country Music Hall of Fame. And it had a letter in it. And then the first paragraph, it said, every year we choose 25 people to be a part of an exhibit. And I'm like, what in the world is this about? And it was for the American Currency exhibit that changes every year. And the letter was explaining, they wanted to feature me and Bobby together in a little a subcategory called Unbroken Circle in the American Currents exhibit. And it was like, I couldn't believe it. I had the first I'd flown home and the first song I heard on the radio that night in the car was an Osborne Brothers song. I'm just like, ugh. Well, then it switches to Dell and the boys doing their hand pick thing, and it was around Bobby's birthday, and so they were playing last year's the year previous's episode, and they were talking about Bobby on that episode because at that time he was still alive. They were talking about him as he was still alive. I'm like, it's torture, And I get home and I open that letter, and the last sentence of that first paragraph was, "We want to feature you and your friend and mentor together, Bobby Osborne." And I literally I hit the ground. I was just weeping. It's like, Bobby, dang it! Like, you knew that I was going to quit, and you did it. Like, how does this happen every time? When I was about to quit the project, I heard his voice. When I was about to quit music, that happens. It's like, okay, I got to keep going. I got to keep doing this. So he's around. He doesn't leave. He gives me a swift kick every once in a while. So
Yeah. Well, so what's on aside from being an IBA Grand Ole Opry member at some point in your life, what's on your bucket list for the next few years? I mean, with your band, I know this project was a big thing for you, and obviously it's not going to ever get forgotten. But do you have other things that you are interested in doing other than your band, or are you just going to focus on the band touring?
A lot of things have changed, I guess, especially since that Country Music Hall of Fame letter. Got new folks in the Po Ramblin Boys. So in August of 24, we celebrated 10 years as a band. And then, a month after that, Josh and Laura left. Josh Sprinkle and Laura Orchall, they left and got married, bought a house in Kentucky, and they're living their best life, and that's what we want for everybody. And so at that point, I was like, is this the time when I hang it up? Which I didn't. Two guys called me that I had never played music with before or anything. John Gooding from California and Max Silverstein from Maine originally, and they both were living in East Tennessee. And they called and was asking about if there was availability within the band. And so, long story short, with that is I didn't know that. I never felt that we needed, a rejuvenation of any sort with the Po Ramblin Boys. We were a core group of originally 4 guys, and to celebrate 10 years for the original members was pretty amazing. But things change, lifestyles change, people change. They want different things in their life. If they find somebody that, whatever, it's fine. But when these guys came in, they brought their youth for one. They brought a palatable like influence of the same. They brought a kinship of artistry, like all these different musics and all these different bands that they liked as much as I liked. So it sparked us three guys, us three originals, Jasper, Jeremy, and myself. It sparked us to dig in a little bit harder and really plow through and do something. And I think I've got a new rekindled spirit for it. The Po Ramblin Boys stuff, and we're working on an album now. Hopefully, it should be out. Hoping early 2026 to feature these new guys and their talents, and they're awesome. They're both incredible musicians. They're both great singers, and they're great guys. A 45-foot bus sounds like a lot, and it's a big thing going down the road. But when you have 8 different personalities on the bus inside, like that's where the rubber meets the road. Literally, like you have to, personalities can clash. They can clash at any time. But then when you put them up in a little soda can, it's bound to pop at some point. So the personalities, they're easygoing, they're great guys, they're willing to help all the time. So again, it's given us a rejuvenation. So that's kind of been the focus at the moment is ensuring to the audiences that what they saw with the original Po Ramblin Boys is still there, it's still relevant, and these guys are just as much a part of the band as the three that started it. So that's the focus is making sure that all that's taken care of. But I don't know. I've had thoughts on maybe doing a country album of sorts, and I've got a few ideas with that. Maybe another mandolin project at some point. That I did a mandolin project years ago. So I did all tunes of the guy that taught me how to play, and I was a part of his band for 2 or 3 years. And I played all his tunes on his old 1923 Gibson F5 Lloyd Lord mandolin, and I have possession of another Missouri artist's 1924 Lloyd Lord F5 mandolin that was the first Lord mandolin I ever played. And so I was thinking about doing all the Don Brown instrumentals and playing them on Don's mandolin and all that kind of stuff. So, there's all kinds of ideas that I have floating through my head. Whether they actually make it to a finished product to where people can hear it, I don't know. It's I guess the curse of being creative in some ways, like your mind sometimes doesn't shut off. I just want to keep going, and I want to play, and I want to sing, and I want to have fun, and that's what's happening. So,
Are you friends with Josh Williams at all?
I know Josh. I don't know him real well. I do know him though, and as I was a kid, I used to see him all the time with Rhonda Vincent, and I was like, man, I want to be like that guy.
I can see you and Josh doing a good duet thing together.
Back when I was younger, a lot of people would say like, "Oh, you sound like Josh," and it's like, "Well, I was trying to sing like him," because Rhonda was everywhere, and Josh is incredible. It really is.
Yeah, he is. Well,
never know. Never know.
You never know.
I never thought that I would be, on a record with Del McCurry and Ronnie and Rob McCurry, and I never thought that record would also hold Billy Strings and Molly Tuttle, and Vince Gill. Like the first compact disc, and that's what they were called back in the day. The first compact disc that I ever got, I got a Walkman for Easter one time from my parents, and they said we don't know what compact disc you want, so let's go down to Walmart. So we went to Walmart, and I picked out my first ever compact disc, and it was Vince Gill's album Souvenirs.
Oh yeah.
And so like the first CD that I ever got was Vince Gill, and now I can say that I have sang on an album with him, and he, I have become friends with Vince Gill, and the things that you dream about, as a kid and aspiring musician and things like that, you can dream all you want to, but and they'll come true if manifestation is a big deal for me. Like if you got to have positivity, and if you don't have the positivity to do it, it's not going to happen. So I believe in that, even though I've had my downtimes. But you can dream, and then all of a sudden there's things that you've never dreamt about that happen, and they're even bigger than the dreams that you even tried to dream. So, Bobby, when I met him in 2003 or 4, whenever that was, getting my picture with him as a kid, which it's in the liner notes of the album. I never would have thought that he would be on my speed dial and we would be texting and cutting an album together. Just being friends. Pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, I just want to shout out to Po Ramblin Boys. You guys are playing in Connecticut next weekend, I believe, at Podunk Bluegrass Festival up in Goshen.
Yes.
So anybody listening or following the podcast, I'd like to go. My wife and I celebrate 30 years anniversary that weekend, so I don't know if I could drag her to Bluegrass concert, but we'll see.
Hey, well, you got to do what you got to do.
Do what you got to do, exactly. But anyway, well, I want to thank you. That was a very heartfelt and interesting conversation. Obviously, it all means a lot to you, and you could tell.
Thanks for wanting to chat.
Yeah, it was very nice. So I'm going to call it here. Thanks again for coming on, CJ. And if I can, I'll come see you at a podunk. I'm going to try to, but see if my wife will tag along.
All right. Keep on keeping on.
All right. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Okay.
I hope you enjoyed our podcast, and thanks for listening. Visit our website, guitartownct.com, for concert and podcast schedules, or just to send us a message. We'd love to hear from you.